Welcome to the Underground, my little underground with Peter A.
It's My Little Underground. I'm Peter A. Joe Stevens of Peel Dream Magazine is back on the show to talk about their fourth album, Mose Main Reading Room, out now on Top Shelf Records. We also talked about the New York influence of this album, not wanting to be boxed into a particular subgenre, the processes and lessons learned from scoring a film, and so much more with Joe Stevens of Peel Dream Magazine, returning to My Little Underground.
My Little Underground.
Joe, good to see you. How's it going, man?
Good. How are you? Thanks for
Pretty
having me.
good. Yeah, anytime. So happy about the new album, Mose Main Reading Room. This is your fourth with Peel Dream Magazine, but your first over at Top Shelf Records. Love
Yes.
this label, home to rap boys, My Little Underground alum like yourself. What made you want to put out this record through this label rather than Slumberland?
That's a good question. I think I was just I had put 3 records out in a row with Slumberland, and I had never worked with anyone else. And I think it's just kind of like a natural thing when you're putting out records that you're curious about, like, you know, working with other people and seeing what that brings. And, like, every label has their own fan base and network and all that kind of stuff. And I have a good relationship with Mike from Slumberland, and it was kind of like, it was a very, like, peaceful departure. It wasn't like acrimonious or anything, and just kind of wanted to try working with a different set of people. And I resonate with the people that work at Top Shelf, and I like that label for a while, and yeah, it just kind of felt like a good segue or something like that into something new.
Yeah. A lot of great artists over there as well. So interesting that you're in that fold. You're yourself, Rap Boys, Thonia Iyer, and a bunch of others. But yeah, I'm happy for you, and big congratulations as well. You sold out the Zubulon, and this is your
Zebulon.
Zebulon.
Yeah,
My
it's
bad.
got a weird name.
Native New Yorker. So I'm still trying to get the ins and outs of the LA music scene. So this is your first Peel Dream Magazine's sellout. What do you attribute this achievement to mostly?
I don't know. I'm not really good at, like, wrapping my head around that kind of thing. I think the record got some good press, like, starting from when it was announced through, like, the release itself. So maybe that brought people out. I don't know. I've just kind of been doing, like, the one thing that I do for a long time, and maybe it's just kind of a natural consequence that it starts to catch on a little bit more with a few other people or something. I don't know.
What did you notice most of all from the crowd at Zebulon when this album came out to say the last record or the year the previous record?
Well, I think people are more receptive to this record than they were to the last one. I think that this current one is, like, a little more crowd pleasery. I think the last one was, I don't know why I chose to make a record like that, but it was, like, pretty esoteric. And I think it, like, turned some people off, or maybe not turned them off, but, like, they were not, like, connecting with it as immediately or something. And yeah, like, I think the reception was just a little quieter and a little more confused with the last record. And this time around, it seems to be a little more like there's, like, a nice kind of synergy between, like, where I'm at currently and, like, where they're at, them being, like, the audience or whatever. And then I think with the Agitprop Alternative, the record that came out before that, that one had a good reception to it, but it was during COVID, so, like, there was no release show, there was nothing. It was like everything was just, like, online, and there was like a reception in that way. Like, I remember, we did, like, a little live stream and stuff like that, and Stereo Gum like, shared it on their website and stuff. I was like, whoa, that's cool. Like, even for, like, not actually having a release show, but it was nice to, like, put out a record right now in this moment and physically play a show and like physically see the people that had been listening to it and stuff. And it's the first time I've ever felt that like on this magnitude, I guess. And there's,
Yeah,
it's not like a crazy. I'm not saying it's like an insane magnitude or anything like that, but it's just like it's a. It feels like a noticeable slight step up or something.
right. And use a great word, synergy. Now, when I was listening to this album, I was walking through 30 Rock and Midtown Manhattan, and I just kind of felt connected to it. And
That's amazing.
it was a
That's
good
like the
sound.
perfect location to listen to.
I'm glad I'm not the only one. I'm glad you see it too, because it just felt very New York City, and it wasn't, because my surrounding area was very loud, but this album is not very loud, and it was comfortable, and it was pulsating, and it was perfect walking music. And being that like New York City is kind of a bit of an influence on this album, tell me about this New York connection to this album, its connection to the New York Public Library. Where was your head at here?
Well, I think I'd have to start by like saying that I'm from White Plains originally, suburbs, and I grew up going to New York, and in particular, like when I was very young, we would go to Manhattan. We would do all the things like we'd go to Central Park, and my mom would take me to the museums and stuff, and my dad would take me to Lower East Side, and we'd get like bagels and just like kind of fun, cute touristy stuff. And then like when I got a little older, my brother moved to Brooklyn, so then I was like going to Brooklyn. And then after college, I moved to Brooklyn, and I lived in New York for like 10 years. So I've been like going to the city and living in the city pretty much all my life, until 4 years ago when I moved to LA. Um, and yeah, so like I think it kind of this record doesn't. It's not like a concept album. There's no clear like, oh, it's about this thing, or it's like et cetera, et cetera. But it's kind of like juxtaposes a few things next to each other in like a way that I intend to be kind of like thought provoking or something, but not necessarily be like, oh, it's about X, Y, or Z. But like one of the things I wanted to just juxtapose was like New York City as like a place and like a feeling, sort of the wonder and like the energy of like this classic like New York thing. And I associate like those touristy things like the museums and the culture in Central Park with a kind of like a whimsical, like intellectual, fun kind of like museumy thing that like has always existed in my mind as like a fun thing to like play around with or something like that. And I had this idea of like making an album that was like each song on it was originally going to be a different hall in the Museum of Natural History. That was my like original idea for it. So I was like, oh, there would be one thing that feels like oceanic and one thing that feels like blah blah blah. And then like the other connection was like not just New York, but like the natural world, quote unquote, and like animality and evolution and all these things that are like embedded in us. Because like the fun thing about the Museum of Natural History is like it's New Yorky, but it's also like you're literally just learning about like the bios, the different like places on the earth and all that kind of stuff, animal kingdom, whatnot. So from there, I started thinking about like animality and all that stuff, and I wanted to juxtapose the two things. So like New York and like nature. And then the other fun thing about that too is like New York represents like urban and like man-made, whereas like nature represents like untouched and like natural. Um, so that was like a fun juxtaposition too. Um, and so yeah, then like as far as like thinking about New York, I was kind of like tapping into this nostalgia that I have for the city and like childhood memories I have of going there, and also as an adult like wandering around the city as like a anonymous like bystander. Like I love that. I love being like in an ocean of people in Manhattan and like feeling totally inconsequential and like invisible. It's kind of like a cool feeling I get sometimes when I'm in New York. And so like on that track, Central Park West, that's kind of like what I'm trying to channel of like I'm just this like anonymous uh, bystander who's observing the city like unfolding. And like for anyone who's experienced the city in that way, it is such an amazing thing to witness and walk through. And like you turn a corner and you do this and you do that, and it's so weird and strange and wondrous. So that was kind of like what I was trying to evoke with that.
That's exactly what I felt. Because listening to songs like Central Park West, I'm just reminding myself of times I'm walking through that neighborhood, or just like you said, being an innocent bystander, just walking and pay attention, keeping your eyes open for different people watching in Central Park, sitting outside of
Yeah,
Columbus Circle. I just feel all that, even though, like you said, it's not like a concrete concept album, but I don't know. I start to conceptualize when I'm listening to this,
yeah.
hanging around New York City. So let's go to the West Coast, right? So you moved out to LA 4 years ago. Now, talk to me about things you may have missed about New York, or things that you don't miss about New York, from just a ordinary citizen living in New York to the creative music community in New York.
Hmm. Well, I don't really miss living in New York at all. I miss New York in like a kind of like it'll always be like part of me, you know, kind of thing. Like I love it because it's so familiar to me. It's a big part of my growing up, etc. But like as far as where I'm at right now, I'm not. I don't miss it living there. And when I lived in Brooklyn, I didn't really like do too much of that like Manhattan stuff. I was just like doing what everybody else does. I was just like working a lot and like, you know, going out in Brooklyn and stuff like that, which was also very cool and fun. But like, it was more of a kind of like a modern day like experience living in the city. I wasn't like taking taxi cabs throughout like Midtown and like you know going to Rockefeller Center all the time. You know what I mean? Like New Yorkers don't do that all the time, which I'm sure you can attest to that.
Absolutely.
So I was kind of like thinking about the New York more as a tourist, not so much like remembering the time where I was like a New Yorker. Um, and then like as far as the music scene there and stuff, I don't really miss it. I honestly like I felt like there was some cool stuff happening for sure, always because it's New York. But by and large, like the music scene there tends to, or it did when I was there at least, it tends to veer toward like no wave and like garagey stuff and like there's kind of like a nihilistic like punk forward streak to stuff there, and that's really cool. But that's just kind of like not where I'm at least right now. Obviously, like having made this like melodic kind of pop record, and I feel much more like kinship with like what's going on like harmonically or musically like in LA. Just because I feel like LA has more bands that pay more attention to harmony and like less attention to like the attitude or the vibe, the badass vibe or something.
Yeah, I get you. Because out in LA, who do you got? You got Mo Dottie, you got Dummy, and those kind of are acts that kind of make sense to what you're describing. Very melodic,
Totally.
focused, and just, not just angry like New York is, which is not a bad thing. It's a good thing.
And both of those
Yeah.
bands are also both of those are great bands who also have like you know plenty of attitude and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
they have an attention paid to like songwriting and harmony that I'll always appreciate.
Yes. Same here. Just as a listener, not even as a musician. But there's one band out here that maybe you know. Do you know Star Cleaner Reunion?
No,
Oh man, I gotta send you some of their stuff. It's
cool,
it's a little bit of, it's sort of akin to what you're doing, but I can't even like compare you to other acts because you're always trying something new and different. So it's not really fair to to really compare. But I think you'll appreciate this group.
cool.
So like your earlier work is very shoegaze inspired and crowd and kind of like Kraftwerk, Stereolab, noise, stuff like that. Did you feel kind of boxed in by that sound at all?
Definitely. I definitely did. I feel like when I made the first record, it's kind of an innocuous record that like doesn't sound so imitational or something. The first record, Modern Metaphysic, but when I made Agitprop Alterna, I felt like I veered a little too close to like, um, like My Bloody Valentine and like an era of like Stereolab for sure. And I don't know if I deserved it or not, but I got a lot of like criticism from like the journalistic community about that. Like even though I got like some praise and stuff, there were a lot of people who were like pretty nasty about that record. That may have had like a small effect on me, kind of like feeling like, oh well, fuck that. Like I didn't want to like I wasn't doing that to be invitational, but like I guess message received if you thought that or something. But I also kind of like felt like um, there was something like unsatisfying about the shoegaze thing. Like it had been such a thing for so long. Like we had already like gone through and ended the like new gaze movement or whatever. And I think of Pure Dream Magazine and my songs as being like more just a sort of a generally like a pop forward song driven thing. And I don't love any like club, so to speak, and like I definitely feel like a kinship to the shoegaze world and stuff. And it's like it's almost like nowadays like any guitar music, any guitar rock is just like shoegaze. But I kind of felt like there was like more out there, and that like the artistic side of me wanted to kind of like push the boundaries and like frustrate myself and others a little bit more. And then when I made Pad, it just like it seemed to be like um, just this like intense reaction, like artistically to the shoegaze thing, where I wanted to mine all of these like uh, sources that would be like surprising to people.
Yeah, I'm definitely pleasantly surprised, for this album in a good way, because I think it's great that seeing a band like PLG Magazine totally evolve and kind of take off the sweater that was put upon you by music critics or culture critics, whatever you want to call them. Let me ask you this about PLG Magazine, right? Do you consider yourself a pop band or a rock band? Because when I'm listening, I don't consider you guys like a rock and roll band. I consider you guys, a band that's making, like you said, pop leaning, pop forward music.
Yeah, I would say the more the latter. Um, I, as you can probably tell, I don't really like think about these like neat definitions anyway. But like my goal for the band is to just like I just want to make music. Like I just want to make like songs and music, and I don't want to be lumped in with like rock in like in oh like indie rock bands. Like oh yeah, like four people standing along a brick wall kind of thing. Like I don't want to do that thing. I want to figure out ways to frustrate that. And like, my music has like clarinet and like glockenspiel and like all these things in it and banjo. And like, that definitely takes it out of the rock band world. And I like that, but that being said, like if you see our show and listen to our previous records, like, of course it's a rock band in a lot of ways. Like I'm standing up there with a guitar, and like a lot of times we play like the agitprop songs with distortion and stuff like that. So I really just want it to be something that cannot be neatly defined.
Well said. I think that's the best descriptor of PLG Magazine that you can give, right? So I noticed you've been doing some music scoring, and you recently scored Let's Start a Cult. So tell me about how you got involved with this project.
I got involved really randomly. I When I first moved to LA, I was like really just going like absolutely gung ho, trying to find like any scoring work I could find because I've been in this like transition for the last 4 years or so, trying to figure out how to like make money doing music outside of Pure Dream. I mean, ideally with Pure Dream, but you need to also have like other sources of income, obviously. So one thing I started doing at the recommendation of someone was like combing through film festivals and seeing who's like submitted uh, movies and just like cold emailing them and like hopefully like watching what they've done and like proposing that we work together on something. And one of them was this like short film that I watched on a Maryland film festival uh, thing, and I was like in LA watching this like film festival thing like online because it was COVID at the time when I reached out to him. And I wrote this guy Ben Kidnick, the director, because he wrote this like really funny weird thing. And I was kind of like, oh, I like to do funny, weird stuff too. And like, if you're ever working on a film, like, let me know. You might not know any composers. And then like, he just wrote me back like a year later, like, hey, I'm making a feature length film with Stavros Halkias. Like, do you want to score it? And like, I was just like, my like jaw dropped, and I was like, yes, 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 100%. And then we started working on it. And it took like a year and a half. It was like a massive, long project, and it's had like lots of ups and downs, but it was cool. It was my first experience scoring a feature, and I am happy that that it was so funny because it's actually like a very funny movie, and that helped me kind of like connect to it because I like that stuff.
What were some of the ups and downs of doing this project?
The I think there were. It's a low budget thing, It's like an indie thing, so it's like it doesn't. It's not like managed like this like tank, Like I feel like big movies, they know exactly what they're going for. I didn't really get much of a budget to work with, so I was making everything in my room, like using like virtual instruments and stuff like that. Um, so it's hard to make like something that actually sounds cool and realistic when like you're limited to like using almost all virtual stuff. But I did use like guitar and some live stuff. But that was hard. I think there was also some like direction, like the direction was changing throughout and stuff. And like we would work on something, I would write a bunch of music, and then somebody would ask me to change it. And I think I had just never done that before, and it's weird. It's like you have to tap into a different brain when you're writing for film, and I don't. That's still something I'm like working on, I think. But we arrived at something that the director was really happy with, and the team seemed to be really happy with. So
Were
I
you
feel
working on
good
Peel
about it.
Dream magazine stuff at the same time?
Yes, I was working on Mose Main Reading Room at the same time for sure.
Wow.
I would like take breaks from working on one to work on the other.
What are some of like the difference in discipline in recording Peel Dream magazine or just recorded music versus like music for a film score? Like what are the differences in, how you apply your craft?
That's a good question. I think when I write Pure Dream stuff, I pay a lot of attention to like what it'll all like mean. Like I think about like, oh, am I writing a record right now, and am I writing a song right now, and like what's this song about and why, and how am I gonna do it? Am I gonna demo it and then record it in the studio, etc., etc. There's this kind of like there's like a playbook or something that I go off of as like an artist where I'm like, oh, this is what I want to say. This is what I want to do. I'm going to do that. And then I think scoring is much more like freewheeling and weird. It's like you can just like drone a note for 5 minutes and it's like that's perfect. It's a little more like weird and like intuitive. I would say scoring for picture. Um, and it can be more fun actually. It's as long as you're on the same page as everyone, and like the time that you're spending is like not constantly being like undone or something like that. That's I'm probably not answering the question very well, but yeah, like I think at a certain level, like it's all songwriting, and it's like just kind of like getting excited about something. Like I'll just be watching a scene and I'll just think about like I just watch it a few times, and then I just kind of try to capture that spark. And it's like once I get it, it's like you find a little bug and you like put a cup on it and you're like, fuck, what do I do now? I know I have it, and like
Yeah.
I just need to like gently like put my hand underneath it and like take it to this thing or whatever. So it's like I once you get it, you gotta like really just enjoy it and like ride it, and yeah, different than purely like writing a Peel Dream magazine song.
And when you talk about not wanting to be defined really or put in some sort of musical box, I guess film scoring, you can experiment and kind of see what works.
Yeah,
And do you sort of bring that experimental energy to Peel Dream magazine?
I think I do because ever since I've been doing, because in doing scoring stuff, I'm learning like so much about like how these DAWs work and all these virtual instruments, and I'm mixing, and I'm doing so much stuff on the fly, and it's like trial by fire. Um, and like I feel like I take all that stuff back into the studio when I'm like working on Peel Dream magazine for sure. I think about stuff like unconsciously now that I never would have before. Like just the like, oh, what's the like frequency range of this instrument I'm working on right now? Like something like that I like never would have thought about years ago. And then also like I've done a lot of like sound alike stuff. Like the majority of my scoring stuff has been for ads. And it's like it'll be someone like, oh, we need a rock song. Oh, we need a jazz song. We need a blah blah. Like in like 2 hours. And just it's gotta just I don't know, just like whatever it is. And like it's taught me to kind of like break down how something sounds and like conjure like something that will evoke that same thing. And I think that that's helped me conjure the ideas that are in my head for Peel Dream magazine too. Like even if they're not like really aspirational, like make it sound like Led Zeppelin doing a bossa nova song. Like, it's not like that, but it's like whatever it is in my head. If I hear three chords that feel like this and they like I can like capture it better than I used to. Um,
What do you feel like you've learned from scoring a film, and some of those skills that you may have learned that you picked up from scoring a film? Like, what are some of the things that you took away from that experience the most?
in general, or in relation to like working on Peel Dream stuff.
Just in general.
Um, well, I think I came away with the fact that films are crazy, and that like everything from the director to the production company to the actors to the producers is a lot of like culture that you have to like learn about. And it's kind of like I've spent a lot of time learning about like the indie music universe culture. So like I temper my conversations in different contexts, with different people. Like I'm talking about things one way with you because this is an interview, but I might
Right.
talk about something differently if I'm talking with a band at a show, or a manager, or a record label, or a fan. There's all these different types of like things you need to talk about with different types of people, and it's like you need to swim in that like seamlessly as like an artist. Similar things apply like when you're working on a movie. Like you need to like talk to a director a certain way, you have to talk to actors a certain way, and the producers, and you need to like learn how to just kind of keep translating things like into your own language, which is hard. um, I would say I also learned a lot about like not always pushing for like melody and harmony when I work on music. That I'm such a like a song driven person that I've needed to like unlearn a lot of that kind of stuff when I'm composing, because you don't want music necessarily in a film that's going to like draw too much attention. So it's kind of like on a pop record, you're trying to get people's attention, but like when you're working on a movie, you're trying to almost like divert their attention to a picture. And that was like a big learning experience as well. Just kind of like being like, hey, don't like rewrite the book with this one. Like this person's just walking down the street and they need some nice little thing in the background. Just keep it simple, stupid, that kind of stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that that's a. I hope people that are listening to this can take that away, because it's something that I had to learn in real life too. Like, you really can't talk to everyone the same way, and I've always had that issue growing up. And yeah, it's fascinating that you can apply that to in your creative world as well.
Well, indie rock and
Yep.
film stuff have like crazy comparisons. It's like there's two kind of like parallel things.
Well, yeah, because when you
Anyway,
go to a record store, you could buy a PLG magazine record and you could buy a film score. So like those
yeah,
audiences can converge at times.
totally.
Yeah.
And that would be like a dream of mine one day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Joe, I appreciate you coming on My Little Underground. Again, this is your time to plug away anything you got going on.
Oh shit. Well, I just plugged a bunch of stuff over the past few months because we had a tour and all this stuff. I would just say, give the new record a listen. I think you'll like it. That's what I say to people. Also, like, we have some shows coming up in November that I'm really excited about. We're doing like a West Coast run. That'll be fun. I love touring the West Coast, and we'll have some more stuff that we're going to announce later for like next year. So keep your eyes out.
I know I will. All right. Thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Cool. I'll
All
talk to
right.
you later.
Later.
My Little Underground.